So hello and welcome to this discussion about ethics in documentary filmmaking, brought to you by the Women Over 50 Film Festival and London Film Academy. Who's looking after the filmmakers? What's the relationship between you as a filmmaker and the person you're filming? Are they a subject, a participant, a contributor? And how much in documentaries is true and how much is staged? And what's the emotional cost for someone whose life ends up being on the big screen? Can ethics in filmmaking be taught? And can we create a code of conduct for documentary filmmaking? And what's the role of film festivals in making sure we're looking after filmmakers, film participants, and audiences? They're just some of the questions I hope we'll be digging into and finding answers to today. A wee bit of housekeeping first, and I've got a couple of bits of bad news. If you tuned in expecting to meet Felicity Beckett from the Picture House, I'm afraid I'm not her. Flick is one of our board members, and unfortunately she's ill, so I'm stepping into her shoes today, and I'll introduce myself to you in a wee bit. And also Anna MacDonald, who's one of the co-founders of the London Film Academy. Sadly, she's not well either today, and she isn't able to join us. So I'll just say a wee word on behalf of Anna about the London Film Academy to welcome you today. The London Film Academy was established in 2001 and is now internationally recognised as an innovative film school, offering more than just an education in film. The London Film Academy produces world-class filmmakers who thrive in an environment that emulates real-world realities. The LFA adopts a hands-on approach while always keeping to its ethos of creating a collaborative, friendly, and inclusive learning environment. And at WOFF, we're absolutely delighted that the London Film Academy has been the sponsor of the WOFF Best Documentary since 2022. And we are delighted to see some of our documentary makers past and present in the event. I see Helen and Lucia and Lucretia and Liberty, and our winner of the best documentary this year, I see Steen Starr in the room, whose documentary, This Is What the World Looks Like When You're Gone, won the top prize. So really glad to see so many documentary makers in with us today. And the Women Over 50 Film Festival, or WOFF, for those of you who don't know us, hosts an annual short film festival and year-round events screening works that are fun, fearless, and real, and that centre on older women in front of and behind the camera. And this event today is the final one of WOFF 2023, and we thank you so much for joining us. This panel is being recorded, and we plan to have parts of it available on the WOFF YouTube channel and on the LFA website in the near future. So keep your eyes out for that. My name is Nuala O'Sullivan, and I'm the facilitator of this panel event. I'm the founder and director of WOFF, and since we launched in 2015, I've watched around 500 short documentaries which have been submitted to the festival. So I'm here as your host and your very experienced documentary watcher. So a quick overview of this afternoon. First, we'll talk in depth to each of our three brilliant filmmaker panelists in turn. And then we'll have some time for questions for our speakers from you, our audience. And then we're going to do some work, all of us together, on what ethical documentary making means in practical terms to a festival like WOFF. And finally, we'll have a catch up with our speakers, and we'll hear what they're up to now and find out how you can connect with them on social media. So let's have a look at our amazing panel. There are three experienced, skillful, truthful documentary makers. First up, we've got Camilla Hall, who's an award-winning documentary maker. Give us a wave, Camilla, so we know who's who. She's a film director and an executive producer. She's the co-founder of Lady and Bird Films in Los Angeles, and she's deeply committed to ethical filmmaking and has taught at the American Film Institute and Sundance Collab, and she's a BAFTA voting member. She's the director of Subject, which I think we'll be talking about quite a lot today. and it's a documentary that explores the experience of sharing a life on screen. It's a documentary about documentaries, and it examines consent and care for filmmakers and participants. In the UK, Subject is available to rent online via the WOFFF website, as well as BFI Player and other outlets. Subject looks at, I guess, maybe Camilla will tell us, I feel it's like about 75 documentaries, including The Staircase, Hoop Dreams, Wolfpack, Capturing the Freedmans, The Square, and Minding the Gap. Which brings us nicely to our second guest, who's Dian Quon. Give us a wave, Dian, who's an Academy Award nominated producer for Minding the Gap, one of the documentaries featured in Subject. Dian is also a WOFFer. We've screened 2 of her films over the years. That's Cliff Superfan and Circle of Iris. More recently, she's been a producer on documentaries screened at Tribeca Film Festival, that's Breaking the News, and at the 50th Telluride Film Festival recently with AKA Mr. Chow. And our third guest is Manuela Maiguashca, maybe you'll help me with that later, who teaches media literacy in Amsterdam and is a visiting lecturer at the London Film Academy. Manuela has worked in Ethiopia, Turkey, the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands as an activist, director, and producer. And her work often focuses on taboo experiences, stigmatized communities, and human rights issues. And her film work has been broadcast and screened internationally and used in a wider range of educational and advocacy outreach campaigns. So, I don't know about you, but I just cannot wait to get started on this panel. Discussions about ethical documentary practices are not new, but over the last 5 years or so, a vibrant and sometimes volatile debate has emerged around ethics and documentary filmmaking. Filmmakers and media scholars are making explicit calls to action, questioning extractive practices in which a subject is unfairly represented or subject to a process in which their trauma is used as plot points in sensational storytelling. So if I can turn to you first, Camilla, what is it about this vibrant and volatile debate, and where has it come from? Perhaps I can invite you to answer this first and to tell us about how you made Subject.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's such an honor to be on this panel with such wonderful women. So I'm really pleased to be here. I think, you know, there's a number of factors that kind of led to this debate and discussion really kind of blowing into the forefront now. I think the why now of it. There had been a lot of incredibly hard work done by the academic and nonprofit sector far before Subject came into the fold. So the work of people like Pat After-Heidi, the work of Sonia Childress, the work of Natalie Bullock-Brown, a lot of people in the US had been working on this for a long time and expressing these sentiments through panels, through academic papers, a lot of amazing articles in like Documentary Magazine, through the IDA. So, you know, the film certainly wasn't the first thing to kind of to talk about this debate. I think it was really kind of in the ether, which is, I'm sure, partly why we had the idea of making it. I think we've been absorbing a lot of this material, reading about it, listening and having these conversations, which kind of in part led us to make the film, that increased awareness that they had been working on. So at the moment, it's really this kind of very special moment where you have the Documentary Accountability Working Group, which is an incredible organization that has developed a major new framework on how we can work through documentaries in a more ethical way. You have Pieces Loud, another nonprofit working on participant care. You have Documentality working in the UK and the US on the care of filmmakers in the filmmaking process. So I think it's one of those moments where everything aligns. And I think all of these people that were working in these subject areas also came together and have been having more and more conversations. So it's a pretty powerful movement. And, you know, companies like Dian Quon, Dian has obviously been a key part of, and, you know, non-profit entities within documentary that haven't just been profit driven have also been a large part of shaping this debate. So subject really came out of, you know, our personal experiences. Jennifer Teixeira is my co-director, and she had been an editor for 20 years in documentary, and I had been initially a print journalist and then moved into documentary filmmaking. And I think for me, looking back on the experiences of my first film and even my second film as a director, I really kind of felt the lack of ethical guidance and perhaps editorial support in a way that I had been used to as a print journalist. And I really felt like I was lacking the kind of framework and support that I had had as a reporter, and was very surprised and shocked to kind of not find it in the independent documentary film space. And so I think for us, the film really came out of these quite challenging moments with participants, and really kind of making a lot of mistakes really as filmmakers, and trying to understand better what could we have done differently, how could we have approached this in a different way, what in our own practice could be changed to have made this situation better for everybody involved. And so we came in with a lot of questions, and I think the film really just raises a lot of those questions. It doesn't provide all of the answers. And throughout the course of making the film, we still made a lot of mistakes. And, you know, it's not that we made subject and now we've kind of cracked the code and we're amazing ethical filmmakers. You know, we continue to make many mistakes along the way. And what we tried to do was just really make sure that there was a flowing conversation between the core participants and us. And they were really kind of teaching us and being very generous with their time and feedback as to how we could, you know, improve on various elements as we were going.
Oh, that's really interesting. To say that you made mistakes and that you were learning as you were going, and that leads me to ask you, well, what did you learn about yourself, and I guess about documentary filmmaking in the making of subject? What are your big takeaways?
Yeah, it's been a very transformative process, I would say. It's kind of like you can't unsee something when you've seen it, and the way that we have spent so much time with people like Margie, who's now a producer on the film, a key participant of the film as well. I think just to fully understand and appreciate her experience of being at the heart of a true crime documentary.
She's from the daughter from the stair.
Yes, so Margie Ratliff is the daughter, yes, of the person accused in the staircase, exactly. Of Michael Peterson.
And that's currently being made into a drama, which is kind of compounding her trauma, is what we learned in Subject.
So the fiction drama show was released actually around the time of the Subject premiere. So it came out in the US in 2022. And she's played by Sophie Turner, which was a very strange experience for her and continues to be. So I think it's just, yeah, I mean, it's been absolutely transformative. I would say there's a lot of projects that I've said no to as a director that I didn't feel comfortable directing. I think the basic elements, the huge popularity of true crime, American or UK stories just being hashed and rehashed. Almost you can find a true crime version of every popular crime story now on they have their own version on every platform, which is kind of, it just, you know, I think there's a lot of films that, you know, I've decided that like I don't want to be a part of, and I don't want to keep making that kind of material. So there's been, yeah, and of course, like the practices that we learned on Subject, working with a participant advocate, with a trained therapist on set, trying to find ways to make releases more fair and equitable for participants involved, sharing Subject with participants for all of our future projects and working through those conversations, and, you know, through the co-producer participants of Subject, they've also made themselves available to talk to new participants that we're filming with. So really trying to share as much as possible about how the process is going to be from kind of day one. But yeah, I think we are different people, to be honest, than when we started. I mean, it was 5 years ago, so there's probably other reasons too. But, you know, I think both Jen and I have really changed a lot through the course of making the film.
That's so interesting, and interesting that actually a lot of what you've learned is how to say no and how to say no more to more films and more things. And interesting that you say that is, you know, it's a long time ago since you started it and how much you've changed. And I think that's a nice segue into Dian, because we were just talking before we started about how long ago Minding the Gap is, and what your memories of it are now to what it was then. So we'll turn to Diana. Thanks so much, Camilla. That's so interesting. Folks, you can put questions in the Q&A or the chat, and you know, we'll come back to them once we've talked to everyone. But we really do want to hear your questions, and there's just so much that Camilla's offered us already that I think there's going to be plenty for us to talk about. If I can turn to you, Diane, now and ask about Minding the Gap. It's a documentary about a group of young skateboarders as they move from their teenage years into young adulthood. And one of the group, Bing Liu, who's the director of Minding the Gap, he's mostly behind the camera. And then quite far into the film, there's a shift in the story, and we see him on camera, and he talks to or interviews his mum. And this is a conversation that features in Subject, the documentary. Can you tell us, Diane, how did that interview come about? And did you, as a producer, have any part in making it happen? What are your memories of how that interview came to be?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Noella, for having me on the panel. Like you said, my first film I ever made is short. God, this was the first festival it was accepted into, and it was really, I remember screaming like, "We got into a festival." It was in 2015 or 2016, so one of your first festivals. So I always appreciated that. It's not too late to come in, not too old to start your new career. So I always appreciate it. And I want to thank you, Camilla, for sharing Subject. I watched it for the first time, and I have to say I came out of it changed, and has made me really think about, as I work on my new documentaries, just a lot of the practices and a lot of what the participants said. It really resonated, will stick with me. So thank you for that film. Minding the Gap was my first film. So I had never produced a film other than my shorts. And when I met Bing, you hear his voice in the film. I saw a rough cut. There was maybe 7 or 8 different characters, but not Bing. And you would hear his voice because he would be asking questions. And so eventually, when I asked him if he needed help, and he said yes, he was a one-man show. It was his first film, was my first film, and we said, let's work together. And it was just a wonderful experience. So like I said, I saw a first cut, which at that time had 7 to 8 characters. Then as we showed the film to different folks and we kept editing it, we realized pretty quickly we needed to narrow down the characters, that 7 characters are too many to follow. So we narrowed down to Kier and Zach. And again, Bing's voice is in the background, but you don't really hear him. And when we showed a work in progress, I remember folks just saying, when you say that you cry too, at a point, one of the subjects says, for participants, Kier says, I wouldn't you cry if you were beaten? And Bing says, I cried too. So when audience heard that, they said, so were you abused? Why isn't your story in as part of it? And so he started thinking about how he might be part of the film. We talked about it. We talked to different editors, and Bing was editing on his own. And we thought maybe we can. So we experimented in many different ways. How do we start integrating his voice? But at the time, his mom still was not in it. Then Nina, one of the characters, the girlfriend of one of our characters admits that she was abused by her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend. I think that's when Bing thought, this is at least how I remember it. I think he remembers it a little differently, but how I remember it was like, if she is going to be vulnerable and tell her story, because she was very, very fearful of sharing that, he thought he should also be willing to be vulnerable and put himself in it, and also address it with his mother. For me, as in terms of my role, I think for me it was always important to hear women's voices. Being a mother, we kept hearing about the fathers and these 3 skateboarders and their father relationships. And I remember always asking, but what about the mothers? Like, where were they? How are they involved, and what are their roles? So to me, that was my little kind of pushing, like, it would be good to hear from your mom. What was hard for me to hear in subject was there's a part where Bing almost breaks down when he shares that what he was hoping from that interview was his mother to say, I love him. And he had never said that in a panel or Q&A before that I've heard. And that really broke my heart. So you can see, like, over the years, it was 2018 it came out, how still these moments affect the participants. In this case, he's the filmmaker, but also, this the participant.
Yeah, it's I think that's one of the big things that comes out in subject, like what a long tail every documentary has. And for Bing to say, after all these years, that he's still having therapy, because he wanted something out of that interview, and it did look like it might have happened, but then he said, well, actually, then it's just this big elephant in the room now. Every time we meet, it's still got this, it's got and I think that's the thing that we really have to take responsibility for as documentary makers, how long this impact, and it can go on and on and on. I wonder a question I'd like to ask you, particularly as an older woman working in film, and you were interested in women's voices. I know that you talked before that you kind of became like a mother hen to this group of young people. What do you think what responsibility do we have to documentary film participants, and how in minding the gap?
Yeah, it was very interesting. Like I said, it was my first film. I'm the mother of 4 grown grown children now. And at that time, when I met them, they were in their 2020, between 20 and 25. Kier was the youngest. And I wasn't sure, like, what are we supposed to do? Like, well, in terms of caring for the filmmakers, participants. And, you brought Camilla Quon. Quon Films was our co-production company, and they had been around for 50 years. And luckily, they gave us a lot of guidance in terms of, like, how to handle things. Everything from, they always shared with participants to see the film before it goes out into the world. And for us, before it even picture locks, because once it picture locks, then it gets expensive to change and all that. So we wanted to show it to them so that if there are any concerns, we address it before it gets too late in the process. So it was great to have them kind of guide us in that way, including when we found out, for instance, when we got into Sundance Film Festival, that I had never had a film in Sundance Film Festival being and we didn't know exactly what to expect. So Quon helped us a little bit, but still it was, how do we prepare also Kier and Zach what to expect? It's like, if we didn't know like what to expect and how hard it was for us, I can imagine for them how difficult it's to have finally their lives kind of like out in public, like in such a public way. So I think though, because I'm a mom, it was like always wanting to know. I made sure, for instance, at Sundance, that I always had someone with each of them. Nina was there too, the girlfriend, Zach and Kara, I just wanted to make sure someone was always with them. Oh, Nina wasn't there. She wasn't able to come, but the mother was there. So Bing's mom was there. So I made sure like my daughter was with one of the mother. Another editor was assigned to be with another, just to make sure that someone was always with them, bringing them to the screenings and talking to them to make sure they're okay. I took them out for dinner. I made sure they got onto their flights. For instance, for Karen, that they had never even flown before. So I really felt like trying to teach them like a mom, like these are the things you have to do to check in. So it was really kind of like this realizing I'm teaching them along the way and hopefully protecting as well. But there were things I realized I couldn't protect. For instance, when we were at festivals and there's sometimes drinking going on, it's like trying to figure out how much do I get involved, and those were questions I just wasn't sure how to.
That's really interesting, yeah, because we'd want to be equal participants, but sometimes we have more knowledge or more experience or more something, and where are those boundaries, where are those lines? That's really interesting.
Because they're brought into this whole world that they weren't exposed to before, and I'm wanting to protect them, but knowing like how much do I get involved? Yeah,
and that, I think that's one of the big dilemmas of being a filmmaker is when you see something, how much should you step in or stay back? Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm sure we'll have questions about things that you said there. It's so interesting and great to have you here. It actually, again, it kind of leads naturally on to Manuela. Diane was talking more about working with teenagers and young adults, and you work a lot with you do a lot of documentary work with children, and I think this brings us nicely into that whole meaty topic about consent. I think when we're thinking about children, and I'm not saying for a moment that adults living with dementia are like children, but in terms of being able to give consent, I think this might be an area. I know there are a few filmmakers here who have done work with people who are living with dementia. And so it kind of brings up this question: can children give consent? Can people living with dementia give consent? And if they can't, how can we tell their stories? What's your experience been, Manuela, on that?
Yes, I work with quite a lot of projects that deal with children who are traumatized. And I think where I need to start in this conversation is sort of not how I can get consent, but more how do we build ethics structurally into our work so that consent is a revisited conversation over and over, and that in the end, for me, consent feels a little bit like a discrete moment in time in which I ask for permission, but documentation is progressive. It's a process, and so because it is, I feel like the way I work with children needs to be as well. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind is that durational filmmaking, which is the project I'm currently working on, in which I documented children starting at the age of 8, growing up slowly. I'm still working on this project into adulthood.
How long ago did it start? If they were 8, how long ago is this?
Now they're in their 20s.
Right. Okay.
And so the idea is really, that's part of the project, to show the growth and the change. But of course, with that, life circumstances change. And with that, people reassess their media differently. So the media is like a parallel doppelganger or lifeline of images and representations that need to be addressed iteratively, I believe. And it's a process that we can do together, but you know, just like Diane and Camilla are saying, that this isn't a science. This is, you're doing your best. We all have the best intentions, but life is messy, and we have to cope with that. And we get it wrong. I think that's extremely important to say out loud and upfront, left, right, and center. And I think it's really important to say to the people we work with. I think it's the other part of how I work, whether it's with children or anyone, is I always work with co-creation models. So it's always collaborative. So I don't tell stories about other people. That's just not how I structure my working process. It's far more that we create spaces of mutual work, mutual labor. We endeavor together. And so the idea is to set goals and co-author as a matter of course, and experimentation and exploration has to be part of that, including doing lots of work like workshops. And I found myself making films to raise money for the projects, because in the end, that's the other flip side of consent is, you know, what kind of skin in the game do I put in? Because I feel that I do need to put skin in the game, and that it's reciprocal. So I think that's another way to kind of, it's even gotten me to a place now where I'm thinking about embedding my documentary practice in other people's work. And that changes the way I'm thinking about authorship, the way I'm thinking about my role, the way I'm thinking about their role. So it's very much collaborative and iterative. I think that's extremely important, that we're repeating and revisiting. Otherwise, it's very easy to get lost. It's very easy. Actually, even when you have the best intentions in the world, you sometimes are tripping on mines you don't know you're standing on. And I think that's something that really needs to be talked about in our industry, like we're doing now, in education, in industry panels. We really need to talk more openly about what goes wrong, so we can learn, instead of kind of feeling that we're not really supposed to be saying this stuff out loud because we've gone wrong, you know. But I think it's that therein lies so many lessons, so much knowledge.
That's and when you say talking in education, because I know that you are a lecturer, I mean, can you teach somebody the ethics of documentary making? What do you think
I believe you can model practices that where you're seeking ethical models of working, and I think we have to model it. I get worried with a kind of box ticking exercise, because, and I've seen this in universities, because I've worked in universities as well, designing EDI, you know, diversity and inclusion programs. And it's incredible to the extent it can be seen as a box ticking exercise, as opposed to structurally reconceptualizing what you're doing. It's not just about putting, different representational faces there to make everyone feel that somehow we're doing things right. I think we all need to figure out what that looks like and what that feels like in conversation. I don't think if we're separate too much, we don't learn from each other. That's why I really believe in this I guess it would be an ethic, the value of working together, learning together. I think that's more important than anything. And that is something you can absolutely do with students. And it doesn't mean you say, this is how you do it. I kind of resist the whole template toolkit thing, because in the end, what works in situation A won't work necessarily in situation B. It's more about the robust space in which we really look at ourselves. And I think we also have to look at the industry. I think we have to look at a lot of things. We have to look at story, how we construct stories, how we understand storytelling, what our relationship to storytelling is, what our relationship to audience is. You know, a big audience versus a really small audience. Yeah. A big audience is going to elicit perhaps more entertainment impulses than if you're designing media for a conversation of two.
Yeah, which definitely to that kind of cliffhanger way of making documentaries that Netflix has got down so pat.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah. So, for example, I worked on a project with foster children who were talking about the day they left home, the day they were taken out of their homes. They'd never spoken about it. They were very traumatized. They could not speak in the first person. They could only speak in the third person through puppets. So I worked with a team of therapists, and we designed a huge project, which included films, but also included an interactive game, which enabled them to tell their other children to use this to tell their story of the day they left home. And this was a really interesting project because it made me realize an audience of two, for me, is as valuable as any. The project ended up being rolled through Europe. It's now in South America, helping a lot of kids. So you can still have impact and reach people, but the media was conceived of as to serve a critical conversation. And that really speaks to me, because I really feel somehow that I know then what that media is aiming for. And I think sometimes we get stuck as filmmakers because we have this imaginary spectatorship of a global audience on the one side, and yet we're trying to serve the needs of our participant. And I think that can create all kinds of conflicts of interest and confusion, real confusion. Yeah.
And speaking of audiences, have we got any questions from our audience to our panel? You can put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A part. And I'm not seeing anything there, which kind of surprises me. Maybe if you've got a question, you could raise your hand, because if there's a raise a hand function. Oh, Camilla Hall has raised her hand. I don't think. Hang on, Camilla.
I was just going to say, I wanted to pick up on something that Diane said, which was really interesting. I was actually very emotional listening to Diane talk about, what it was like to watch the Minding the Gap section. And, I think in some ways we were talking about this with Margie Ratliff last night, who's one of our main participants. And I think she went in a very similar vein to how Bing had gone into Minding the Gap. And she was explaining how she thought that being part of Subject would kind of help heal like her past traumas and help resolve things that had happened in her life related to the staircase. But in fact, that wasn't the result of Subject, but the result for her was to find a voice to discuss this, to raise awareness for other people who could experience the same feelings or be feeling the same way that she had felt by choosing to be a part of a film. And I feel like Bing almost spoke to the same conclusions, that he was talking about this to help others, but ultimately it's not necessarily, going on camera may not necessarily be the solution to resolution of past trauma. And I think it was just interesting that what she spoke about really mirrored in many ways what Bing had said, and it almost was a kind of selfless act on both of their parts to actually go so deep and personal to try to open that conversation to people that may be having it with themselves and have not necessarily spoke about it openly before. So I just thought that was an interesting parallel.
HK has got their hand raised, but I'm not sure how we can.
Hi, Manuela, can you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Okay, on the chat, it's saying that the chat is disabled.
Oh, Aaron from London Film Academy, can you help us there? I'm not sure if Aaron is in the background. I'm sorry, I'm not in charge of any of this tech. I thought it was weird. Is that Helen?
Yeah, it is. It's Helen from Liverpool.
Right. Well, you're on now, so have you got a question for us?
Okay. Oh, right. You can't see my. So I've just done a project which involved workshops, 5 or 6 workshops, which culminated in a photographic exhibition, which has then, my part of it was to make a short film. So over the weekend we put the exhibition up. It was in a public setting and it was around queer identity, queer, LGBT, specifically trans identity. and we had 2 instances of vandalism, so we've had to take it down to protect, you know, the participants. I felt along the way that we, like, as one of the project leaders, we've let the participants down in that way. So I want to check now with so it's making me think about the film. So the film's going to have a screening in a few weeks' time, of just circling back and just really thinking about who's in the film, permissions, consent. It's just made me think about a whole load of stuff, to be honest, because this is people's lives, because I don't want to make art that injures people. I don't want to make work that injures, and there's been injury. You know, it is dangerous for some LGBT people, specifically trans people, to for artwork to be stolen, not knowing who that is. So it's kind of set a real problem ahead, and I'm just wondering if Manuela or any of the other, Camilla and Diana, if you've got any advice about how to go back and retrace my steps around the film.
Could you perhaps share what the image, could you just share a little more, what were the physical artifacts that were stolen, and just give a little more information?
The physical artifacts was the descriptor with everybody's name on, and then one of the people involved in it is trans person. That was the only image taken. So there were about 9 images up and 9 poems that went side by side. So the visibly trans person's image was stolen, and the descriptor with queer, it's a film about queer ecology, that was taken as well. That had all of our names on. I had no control over that side of the project, and I wish now I'd have been a bit more forthright in that side of the project. A bit more coming forward, a bit more checking things out.
Is there any way that you could regroup with your team and with the collaborators, with your participants, to kind of take power back, given what's happened? If there's been an interruption of this kind, perhaps use that perhaps as a way to regroup everybody, rethink the work, rethink screening, like almost so it becomes an active informer in how you go forward with media?
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Yeah, it's trying to get to get yeah, it's different. Yeah, I'm really up for that.
Yeah,
I'm really up for that. There feels to be a little bit of resistance to that. I don't know, maybe it's just a little bit of time to think about what's happened, because we've reported it to the police as a hate crime as well. So we've gone from making an art project which encompassed a film and photography exhibition to reporting it to reporting an element of this project to the police, something that I never thought I'd be in.
Yeah.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the idea of time. And I think it's when we're kind of pushed up against the deadline, or you've got this screening date, and you know, it's always just remembering, you know, you can screen another time, you can take another festival, like getting things right and safe and feeling comfortable and confident for everyone on the team is always going to be more important than, you know, sticking to a specific deadline. Those deadlines can shift. And I think we get so, you know, obviously we always want to do our best, and we're just ingrained at trying to hit deadlines, and I think it does sound like you need a little bit of time to kind of to regroup, and you know, and that conversation could lead to really interesting, it may lead to an even better film. They may say, you know what, we want to document what's happened, like maybe you want to document your experience as a filmmaker of this having happened. I mean, I think we would all hope in this society at this point that this is not something that we would be up against. And it's devastating to hear that this is something you've experienced. And maybe that's also something important to document for yourself, and just what that has been like for you. Because I think it's a pretty shocking, you know,
yeah, we were hoping it was going to be up for 5 years. We had to take it down in less than 36 hours.
That's
you know, this is so bad is transphobia out there, you know. So and I'm part of that community. I'm kind of part of that film. I'm also a participant. I'm also a workshop leader, project leader, but I'm the filmmaker. I'm the director primarily. So yeah, super helpful from you both. Thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Helen. And it's definitely, it's already clear that this is just the beginning of a lot of us having this conversation. And as Camilla said at the beginning, you know, it brings up more questions than answers. But even that we're starting to think about this and thinking about embedding it in our own practice, I hope will be helpful. But I'm really sorry to hear that, because I saw those photos up on Instagram. I mean, that's a real shame. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I don't even know how to announce that, you know, we've had to suspend the project because of, you know, targeted transphobia. You know, it's but you know, it's you know what, it is a learning curve, and bizarrely it did open up a better conversation with the group, even if it was for a moment. You know, I'd like us to go back to that, but it did kind of broke the ice a little bit of like, hang on a minute, why are we being so precious about this? We need to keep talking about consent and permissions, and what are we doing? What are we actually doing? You know, when you make yourself visible as queer people, there's, and you know, as you said, there is skin in the game. You know, maybe there's too much skin in the game.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I'm just aware of time, and I'm going to go on to another question, but that's really, it really just kind of crystallized really much of what all three of our speakers were saying. So that's really kind of just galvanized us all around that, Helen. Sophia says,
I was just gonna mention to Helen too that I hope she finds support. It feels like a lot is on her, and I was lucky, for instance, that at Contemplin had folks there to help me navigate. And I just hope that, Helen, you have some folks that you can. Don't forget about taking care of yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And we're here in the WOFF community. You're one of us, Helen. So we're here for you too. Thanks for that, Diane. Sophia says to the panelists, have you had any success in pro bono attorneys assisting you in the legal work related to documentary filmmakers? Anybody want to take that one?
I have. I'm very lucky in that Contemplin, as a production company, one of the things they offer is pro bono legal on because there's a legal firm that has taken on Contemplin and their films as what they want to give back to it by doing this pro bono. And so many of my films, the majority of my films are not Contemplin films, but because I done through Contemplin, they just have such great hearts. I've been lucky that they've come on to many of my projects and offered pro bono work, just because they believe in the messages of the films.
Wow, I'm really jealous of Diane. Our legal bills are enormous every year. I think we've had some luck with pro bono work in the initial phases. In fact, there's an announcement on a film that's going to happen today, and that film, to get to the status of it being fully funded, required that pro bono work at the beginning that, you know, would ultimately be paid for when the deal went through. And now 5 years later, it's a lovely story and it's going to be seen by a lot of people around the world. So I think it's possible, but I would say in general, lawyers are the one set of people that typically need to be paid and want to be paid. So it's quite a challenge, but Diane's obviously one step ahead, and it's really encouraging. I'm going to try and get the name of the firm out of her at some point.
It's not every film, but a few of my films, because not every film, you know, is necessary. I mean, there's so many different kinds of documentaries, so not everyone is a social issue kind of documentary. So not all of them, and they are expensive. The other thing that some of my films, the EP, we've used university law centers, and they do it as pro bono. They don't do the big deals because they're still learning, but the day-to-day things that you may need, contracts and releases, they're able to do. And we've been very lucky with that, the law centers.
Great, thank you so much for that. We've got another question coming in here, and I think we might be able to tie this in with a kind of takeaway that I was hoping that we would be able to take out of this workshop. Now, I'm aware that Manuela said, you know, we're not really about box ticking, but I do, as a small film festival, I think that WOFF has to start somewhere, and we don't have anything about ethical documentary, and I'm galvanized by this panel event that London Film Academy invited us into, to really think about this issue that I hadn't really thought about before. So a thing that I was interested in is thinking about what role a film festival might play to ensure that what we screen is ethically made. And at WOFF, we're thinking about developing a statement. It will be a box ticking activity, but it's a box that people will have to actively tick. and I think that's valid where we are. And it would be similar to the box that filmmakers currently have to tick, which is to say that by submitting their work to WOFF, quote, all films and music rights, licenses and clearances have been attained in accordance with UK copyright laws. So filmmakers have to sign up to that. So what I'm interested in is what would ethical documentary making mean in practical terms for a small festival like WOFF? And I'd like us, if we could, as panelists and audiences, to maybe just give us, like, you know, one line that they think would be good to include. And I want to go back now to, I've just lost, Lucretia, I've lost your comment. You were asking about how we can get consent from older people living with dementia. So like something about that we've got consent, informed consent from filmmakers. I mean, is there a top concern or a top idea that anybody here on the panel or in the audience thinks that WOFF should include as our first? This is a baby step for WOFF to show that we're taking care of filmmakers, our audience, and also the participants who are in films.
I have one suggestion.
Great.
I was just thinking now, just because it just feels to me very difficult to know. Sometimes, being very honest, I think I've been dealing with things ethically and then haven't, you know, like, so even in terms of how I represent myself to the festival, I don't know that that's always going to unearth things, but what does unearth things are conversations. And so if you're a festival, for example, that also invites filmmakers, because I think it's, you know, I would love to powwow with more documentary filmmakers about things that didn't work, and to get our feet dirty, to get into the mud together, and not to judge each other, to just say, hey, this is confusing me, or this is an issue, and having some kind of maybe a feedback role where we're able to go somewhere to have those conversations, understanding that we're all in this trying to do our best, but that we don't always manage, or we're not sure what will work. And maybe if there are thematics in your programming, each thematic might have a very interesting ethical question inductively arrived at from that thematic. And then we could even have just a conversation, and filmmakers who either have people who watch the films, but also those who make the films can actually unpack some of those questions. I think maybe that could be one role, wonderful role, a festival could participate in, that dialogical component of the media.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, and that, I mean, and that does happen kind of organically.
Yeah.
Well, that's what these conversations, when we're in real life, you know, that's what we're talking about. But you're absolutely right to maybe kind of put that down as a more stated aim would be really useful. And Camilla has put in this great language that Sundance uses, so definitely look at that to think about saying that care and safety of the subjects. Camilla, we changed to participant. Absolutely, we've changed our language on that already. Yeah, so that's really useful. Yeah, is there anybody else in the audience or Diane who got some ideas of what WOFF should be thinking about?
I've seen often now festivals also asking, what is your connection to the story as a filmmaker? And why are you telling the story? Why are you telling the story? I think that connection and authenticity, or I don't know the best word, the connection, I think is very important. And it's made me, just by having to answer the question, it makes me think a lot about, why am I telling the story? What is my hope for telling this story? So I think I would appreciate that as a contribution. I want to also mention, so what Manuela said, I make mistakes all the time, and I wish I had seen Subject when I first started. It made me really think back to how I would have done it differently with Zach and Kira, both very ending, all very smart young men, and how could I have taken better care of them? I don't know. It's such a tough thing. You're always thinking, well, how could I have done better? But anyway, back to that, your question. It's how are you connected to the story?
Yes, that's a thing that we have on the WOFF program is, what's the WOFF connection? Who's the woman over 50 connection? But actually, what's your, we might add an extra one in the programs, is what's your connection? And then that's filmmakers talking to the audience about their connection, which then might bring back to Manuela's point that filmmakers could see each other's connection. So it feels like there's a way to bring that all together. It says that the chat is open, but I am not seeing anything in the chat, which just is not what a WOFF conversation is like. Girls and boys and non-binary folks. I think something is not quite working here. So I'm just going to plow on. Connor has said, thank you, this is very interesting and informative. Will we be able to access a recording of this meeting? Yes, Connor, lovely to see you there. Your nature nurture film was an absolute gem. Yes, this is being recorded, and we hope it's going to go up on the WOFF YouTube channel, and it will also be available to the London Film Academy. I think we're probably going to clip some bits of it. So yes, it should be available. So sometimes the chat is working, but sometimes not. I think we've had some really good, some great conversations and brilliant questions. I love the idea that this is just the kind of start of the conversation. It's almost time. I don't really know where the hour has gone. Can we go around? We'll start in reverse order, starting with Manuela. Can you tell us what you're working on just now, and how can people follow you? Either through a website or socials, or if you don't want to be contacted, that's fine too. But what are you working on just now, and how can people stay in touch with you, please?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only social I really do, and not even that so much. But I am up to date there, and I am alive on LinkedIn. And I'm always happy to connect with people. I'm at the moment stepped into some scholarly work. So I'm trying to finish my PhD on ethics in documentary filmmaking. And then I will get back to my project work. But at the moment, I'm ensconced in books and papers.
Oh, and will it be publicly available, do you think, when you're finished your PhD?
So the PhD will have an embargo on it initially, because the PhD is designed around all my mistakes over the last 10 years. And lessons learned from them. And of course, it implicates people, so it will need to be completely redacted and revised. And then, yes, I'm very hopeful to publish various articles and things from it once I'm clear from the
keep WOFF up to date, because we'll want to read about that. Thank you so much. Diane, what about you? What are you up to? You got tons of things on the festival circuit just now, and how can people keep connected with you?
So Breaking the News, which you mentioned, just premiered at Tribeca in June and will be on Independent Lens in February. AKA Mr. Chow premieres tomorrow in New York, and will be on HBO October 22nd. And then just in development on a few other docs, as well as and in production, post-production on a few other film docs, and a fiction film as well. So hopefully you can find out more about that. I'm the same with Manuela. I am on Instagram mostly to promote my films, not my personal life, but I also have a website, dianquon.com, so you can contact me there. And
Fantastic.
we'd love to hear from folks.
Great. And Camilla, what about you? What are you up to, and how can people keep up with you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Camilla Hall Films, same as Diane. It's mostly work-related activity. At the moment, we're preparing for our US theatrical release of Subject. So through that, we'll be Oscar qualified. So we're doing a very indie Oscar campaign at the moment, which is really fun and generating a lot of incredible conversations, as well as it being very hard work. But aside from that, we have founded a production company, Lady and Bird Films, which is founded with my two partners, Rita Baghdadi and Jennifer Teixeira. And essentially, we're trying to really make films that matter, films that we love, films that we cared about, the type of films that inspired us to make documentaries in the first place. And yeah, we're really building the company and have a pretty large slate, and an exciting announcement later today. It might have even gone live in the last few minutes, but yeah, I would love to keep in touch with all of you. And really, it was just such an honor to be a part of this and such deep and interesting conversations. I definitely want to talk even more with Diane about her thoughts and everything about Minding the Gap. And I feel like we should have done this. I would have loved to have done this even sooner. So it's been a real experience.
Oh, it's been absolutely fabulous to just be in the headlights with you all. I've just been like a deer in the headlights. Lucretia Knapp says, thank you all, great energy and so much to think about. Looking forward to seeing more of your work soon. She's talking to all of you. It's been a total delight and a total pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best for all your projects. Please stay in touch with WOFF, and hope we'll see you in the real world one day soon. And I think it's goodbye from all of us now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.